Okay, so welcome to the Enduring Advantage's first working session. No edits, just working out loud, live, on the question in front of us right now. What does a checkpoint actually catch and what it quietly lets through? For the record, I have to use notes. Keeps me from spinning off into the cosmos or falling down a rabbit hole. Pardon my PowerPoint. I get so excited about this stuff. So why does it matter? Why now? Claude just introduced inference hooks, and I wanted to put something together to let you know how the world has changed. I also wanted to provide a little eye candy. So that's why we've switched things up a little bit. So now that we've reached our cruising altitude of 50,000 feet, let's get started. So, inference hook, pardon my PowerPoint, this is about two things. It's about hooks and inference hooks. And there are two kinds of hooks. I mean, basically, you have the Claude hooks, which have to do with using Claude code, are the code hooks. And the code hooks are there to provide you with the ability to basically create hooks or use hooks within your project, within your local project. It's for individual developers. It only is available to Claude Code. It can use the full context of what's available. And right now, Claude Code has like a million tokens or a million tokens available. So it's a very large context window. Basically, it's hard to break it. The enterprise inference hooks are hooks that are managed within Claude, within the Claude infrastructure. They are allowed to go across all of the Claude instances. So they can go across chat and co-work and Claude code. So basically, they allow you to use the web, the desktop, and the CLI. They're context visible, transcript text, tool calls, attachment text, never raw bytes, system prompt, or internal context. So what does this mean? It means that you have the ability now, especially with enterprise or with inference, which is basically an enterprise tool. So in order to use this, the minimum you're going to spend is $400 a month. So it's $20 per seat, and the minimum number of seats is 20. So we're talking $400 a month every month. Okay. So that's the hook. That's the inference. That's what we came to talk about because it just showed up. It allows you to monitor things, to what a prompt or tool can contain, what a tool call can contain. So you can't put something in there that's malicious. It's going down that path. We're not all the way there yet, but that's where we're headed, where we can actually control or monitor we can monitor what's being sent, monitor through policy, not actually going in and looking at opening up the individual prompts and saying, this is what this person is looking for. They want to find someone's phone number so they can ask them out on a date. You can't do that kind of thing. But what you can do is say, okay, here are the kind of things that we're allowing you to put in, and here are the things we don't want you to put in. That's an inference hook. Once the information's in, we can say, well, we really don't like you looking for that kind of information, or we really don't want you looking into that kind of stuff. These things are proprietary, and unfortunately, you're a third-party vendor. You can't see that. That's what we're talking about with an inference hook. If you put it in and it comes back, then we're going to look at it on the way back and go, oh, you got a little too much information there. We thought that what you put in was going to be good, it was going to be safe. But what you got back is too much information. You got back, we're talking about you got back the social security number and the date of birth and all the personal information for the CEO. That's not what we want. We don't want you to have that if you're a third party vendor. We want you to, the smart thing, tell me who's on the board. Okay, I can tell you that. These are the people on the board. Tell me what their social security number is. Tell me their phone numbers. Tell me their first, their first pet's name, what high school they went to. That's stuff that shouldn't come back to you when you say, tell me who's on the board. You shouldn't get this personal information. And there are different places within the organizations where this kind of information exists, where you could ask for something, and depending on what the question is, the LLM or the MCP server can come back to you with more information than you should have. And that's why the inference stuff works. Now, the second box here, we talk about authority. And that's a whole different bailiwick. That's a whole different thing. For our architecture, for the architecture we're proposing, this MCP metadata architecture, we're proposing something different. We're proposing a protection bubble, so that if you are a third-party vendor, if you are someone who's new to the company and you ask a question that you shouldn't have access to, we're going to control that. We're going to control that and create what's called a blast radius. And what the blast radius does is it allows us to basically limit or determine how much risk we want for a given role. We generally go role based, so that we're looking at this going, okay, so a brand new HR person, we're not going to give them the full range of information. A brand new operator who's learning how to produce our content, we're not going to give them everything that's available within our system. We're going to give them a slice, a piece. And that's what we talk about the authority, and we talk about the perimeter and what perimeter we put around things. Now, everything we have that's important to the organization, we want inside that perimeter. And that brings us to the next one. That brings us to the protection bubble. That's what we call it. We call it a protection bubble. And the protection bubble has three components. And I'm actually going to start on the right. The identity layer, the MCP identity center. This is where the policy of who has access to what is determined. You do that in the identity center. You say, okay, this role has this kind of access. And based on, now what we do here is a little different. We don't assume with the MMA or the MCP metadata architecture, we don't assume that you only have one of each. We only have one. So we assume you have silos, that you've been around long enough that you bought something. You've been around long enough that you have different factions within your organizations that like to take control. This could be P&L. Someone has P&L responsibilities and they want to control everything within their organization, within their purview. If they're responsible for it, they want to control it. So what we have is we have the identity layer, or operator identity layer, which is the MCP identity center, where we create the policies. Next, we have the MCP control plane, which is basically the MCP IDP identity provider. This is a dedicated identity provider. So basically the identity center creates a policy and sends that over to the MCP identity provider. And the identity provider provides access and credentials. So when you log in, you basically log into the identity provider. In the old days, you would log into a given application. But in today's organizations, in today's security world, you log in to the identity provider. and only the identity provider. You get your credentials, and now you can talk to the MCP metadata registry. And what we want to do with that is we want to actually create a registry which limits what you can see. That's the whole purpose, is to basically, actually there's another purpose. We have the advantage there, but we don't want to get into that right now. But for the purposes of this conversation, we want to talk about just the registry as in its simplest form. The registry basically takes a request from an LLM and determines which MCP server is best capable of responding or satisfying that that response. So it's not some, we don't want it. We don't want third parties. We don't want new operators. We don't want people to be able to basically say, okay, I'm in a different organization. I'm in a different division within the company, and I want to see what they're doing in that other division, that other company that we have a responsibility for. I want to see what they're doing. So I'm going to query their MCP servers. We don't want that. We want to be able to limit what people can see and what requests they can make. And the MCP server, the MCP metadata registry, what it does is it basically makes a decision. You made a request, but based on your credentials, these are the resources you have access to. These are the tools you have access to. And I'm going to limit the number of tools because we also have a situation where there's only so many tools that a given session can handle. There is a problem now where each MCP server could have 20, 30 tools associated with it. But the MCP clients can only handle maybe 15, maybe 40. So if each server can handle 30 tools, and you have 15 servers that you could potentially be talking to, then you want something that's going to allow you to limit the number of tools that are sent back to you so that you don't swallow up your context window, your ability to do work. You don't want to swallow that up just by tool definitions. We're not even talking about doing the work and getting a response back. We're talking about the ability to actually receive the information to tell you what the tool is about. So that's what the registry does. It limits the number of tools that are available to you, and it limits where you can see based on policies within the MCP Identity Center. So that's where we are with that. We have the request comes in. Now, another thing that the MCP Identity Provider does is it federates things. It does what's called federation, identity federation. So if you have if you're using a third party IDP, identity provider, then you can basically federate with the MCP IDP server so that the people who are set up and the corporate IDP, identity provider, don't have to re-register. Basically, the roles that they have are captured in the identity center so that when the person makes a request through their LLM, through their MCP client to get information from your internal network, from the stuff inside the perimeter, then basically what happens is that the IDP server goes, okay, this person has this role. They made a request. And based on the policies that came from the identity center, we increase the number of credentials. We increase the ability of the person, we give them additional privileges. So based on what's in the identity center, they gain additional privileges, and then they use those privileges to talk to the MCP metadata registry. So the privileges are granted. Now they're actually created in the identity center, but they're granted in the MCP identity provider, and they're consumed or used in the MCP metadata registry. So what does this have to do with inference? Inference hooks. So what we have is we have the protection bubble, and that basically surrounds everything that's internal to the organization. These are the crown jewels. These are the things we don't want the world to see. This is a problem with most. This is a problem with most LLMs are with most AI today. At this point, they don't have a protection bubble. Most of the architectures that you see today and all of the people who are telling you how to set things up, they don't provide you with any type of security, which either limits the blast radius or limits the number of tool calls so that it's manageable, or basically understands the topography of your organization. They don't know what you have inside. And basically, you could spend a lot of tokens trying to figure out which server is the best one. And there's no way to keep someone who has the ability to talk to your servers sitting inside your building to be able to talk to any of the MCP servers that are available. So the protection bubble handles that. The hook, the inference hook, handles whether or not I guess what they're calling inference actor, which is basically your agent, your chat window, your co-work window, Claude Code, all three of those, they have access to the protection bubble. At some form, you assume that since they're in the organization, they've been set up, they have their roles configured, and they have access to the information that is configured in the identity center. So based on that information, what the hook does is it basically says, we're going to examine the questions you're going to put in, and we're going to examine the response. And we're going to determine, is this something we want you to see? Is this a question we want you to ask? And is this a response we're willing for you to have? There's some other stuff here. Basically, I can send you, put a comment down there and we can talk about whether I send you the rest of the slide deck. We talk about what the coverage is, what the architecture must do, and durability and variant, mono externality, local editability, but based on what we've had an opportunity to talk about, an inference hook tells you what got said. The bubble parameter tells you who was allowed to say it. And neither one does the other one's job. You need both. So the inference hook is a good start, but it can't basically limit the blast radius. If you have a situation where you have no protection bubble, then everything is out in the open. And I kind of like to say it's swinging in the breeze, and it's just a matter of time before something bad happens. So with that said, didn't want to end on a down note, because this is something we've been wanting. The only thing is missing is we need to get to smaller organizations, because not everybody's going to have a 20-person organization these days. We want this to be available to teams, 5, 10 people company, small organization, solo organizations. That's what we need. And it's just a matter of time. We assume, with AI, you never get upset, you never complain, because you know that it's only going to get better. and you know that somebody else, if you're thinking it, somebody else is thinking it, and it's just a matter of time before Claude is going to come up and they're going to fix it and they're going to give us access. They always start with some, there's always a tier one player and they get access early, but eventually we get access. And with that, we change the world. And I just want to thank you for showing up and I appreciate it. You have a good one. I'm out.